Say hi, baby Ben. Say hi, YouTube. Yeah. Just hanging out here with Mr. Benjamin while my wife is meeting up for lunch with one of her coworkers. Got some stuff going on that she had to do. So here I am with baby Ben, and just found out that Charlie himself is feeling a bit under the weather, so as soon as she comes home, I'm going to be going to pick him up. Anyway, wanted to get back to rolling with the vlogs. We're going to continue right about where we left off in the previous episode, the day after my birthday, put in a session. And then after we go through that, the next vlog after that will actually detail my trip to Los Angeles. Had some really good eats while we were there, as well as checked out the Gardens Poker Room. Had a great time there, really beautiful spot, so we got some videos, and that'll be the vlog after this one. Anyway, that's all for now. Say bye-bye, Ben. Can you say adios? It's alright, he's got nothing to say. Alright, catch you guys soon. Alright, we have about half an hour before I have to get Charlie, so let's get into the hands from today's session. In the first one, there is an early position limp. The middle position now makes it 25. I'm on the button with King Jack of clubs. I flat, the big blind calls, limper calls. We go four ways to a flop of Jack 9-4 with two spades. It checks to me. I tanked for a bit and bet 70 to 100. The blind folds. And now the first limp caller jams it in there for 230 about. The opener, who has king queen for a gut shot, folds. I obviously snap it off. I think there's a lot of straight draws, flush draws here. I only really expect to lose to like sets and ace jack. The blind folds, and he ends up having ace 10 of spades, and we end up holding against that hand. I think it comes like brick. No spades, obviously no ace. I don't even think any more Broadway cards. It just ends up running like 4 or 5, something like that. So we do hold there and win a pretty nice pot to start off the session. In this next hand, there are 4 limpers. The button now makes it 15. I have king queen offsuit in the small blind. I think I'm going to oftentimes have the best hand here. The problem is this is a hand that is going to be tough to play out of position. Obviously, 3 betting here can put you in some tricky spots. But recently I've been getting involved in some sticky situations where I'm calling with this hand, going multi-way, and finding myself in some really tough spots where I end up having just top pair on some wet boards like queen 10-9, things of that nature. So I think offsuit, this hand just plays significantly better. Heads up, I 3-bet to 55. It folds back to this player, and he ends up calling pretty quickly. I think he could be doing this just fairly wide, like all ace-x suited, pocket pairs, things of that nature. The flop comes queen 10-8 rainbow. Obviously a pretty connected board. I kind of contemplate checking here to induce some bluffs for him. He is playing 500 or 600, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want to check, because if he bets, I think I'm going to get myself into a tricky spot where I'm going to have to like check call down. And if he ends up having like queen 10 or something like that, I think if I bet and get raised, I could actually make some exploitative folds against this particular opponent. I decided to lead for 60, and he folds really quickly. As you can see, I think this hand plays just significantly better as the aggressor. Oftentimes people get themselves in these spots where they just flat. He goes 6 ways to this flop. They don't know what to do. Somebody bets, they call, the turn's a jack, and they're like, when you have hands like king, queen, queen, jack, some ace jack offsuit, the hands play significantly better heads up than they do in some 5 or 6 way pots, as they often will happen. So if you can be the aggressor, that's really the key to poker. You want to kind of take charge, and if somebody fights back, you can just fold, because the truth of the matter is most people aren't often getting out of line. And if you've been pretty aggressive and you're showing that you have a big hand, but somebody else is showing you that they have a bigger hand, chances are they actually do, unless of course there are sometimes some guys who like to get out of line, but that's what it's all about. In this hand, we have a straddle. There is an early position limper. I have king queen offsuit in late position. Once again, I'm going to be isolating here. I make it 45. Now the small blind tanks and ends up calling. The straddler now rips it in for about $101, I think, total. The limper folds. In this situation, because it is only like $56 more to me, I'm obviously never folding, but I'd much rather be playing this pot heads up than three ways. Because the small blind tank called, I think he's going to be capped to some hands like ace queen, ace jack suited, things of that nature, maybe some pocket pairs like jacks, tens. So I'm going to put him in a really tough spot if I re-raise here, which is obviously what I want to be doing. So I make it 205. He tanks for a bit and ends up folding king queen suited. The flop comes jack high, the turn is a 9. I let the guy know he's drawing dead. He's obviously never going to win. Sure enough, the river's a 10 and we make the nuts. Obviously, I think if the other player ends up calling here, then chances are I'm going to win the pot, because if he like checks the flop, I might c-bet and now he's going to have to fold. The player who jammed had ace-3 suited, so obviously got a little bit lucky here, there, but it is like 60-40. As played, I don't really like what the player in the small blind is doing here with king-queen suited. I think his call is fine, but it's much better to just be the aggressor. If he ends up 3-betting me here, I'm just going to fold. And, his hand just doesn't play that well out of position against a competent opponent. If you want to be playing a hand like king, queen, queen, jack out of position, I think it's just going to play much better as a 3-bet, because you're just not going to make a hand strong enough against the preflop opener's range. Like, what's your hope here, really? That I'm going to have, like, pocket jacks and the flop comes queen high and I'm going to give you all my money? No, that's not the case, So really, it's a big mistake to just be calling with a wide variety of hands out of position and hoping to, flop some big hands. Just be the aggressor and pounce on people. Beat them up. We've been straddling a fair amount in the game. I think there's been a couple of rounds of straddles. In this particular hand, the under the gun player does not straddle. The player to his immediate left now makes it 10. I don't know if he's doing this kind of to make up for the lack of the straddle, or if he actually has a hand he wants to be raising. Doesn't really matter, because I have the weapons of mass destruction. Oh yeah, the aces. I make it 40. Small blind calls, and the player who made it 10 obviously is going to be folding. If he's opening for 10, I expect him to call here with a wide variety of hands. He calls. We go three ways to a flop of 9, 8, 6 with 2 clubs. I have the ace of clubs. It was check, check to me. This is a spot on this sort of wet board where sometimes I will elect to check it back, because I don't want to get myself into a spot where if I bet and get check raised, I'm going to have a really tough time here. I can't be folding with the ace of clubs, as I do have the backdoor nut flush draw. Similarly, they're just going to put me in a tough spot because I have the type of hand that I'm representing, which is like an overpair. People can get out of line here with hands like 9-10 offsuit, which are actually going to have great equity against me and put me in a troubled spot. So I like to check it back, kind of play for some pot control. I don't necessarily want to get out of line against this player who opened at 10. He is playing like over 1,500, so I don't really want to be playing a 600 big blind pot. The turn is an offsuit queen. 10 jack does get there. It goes check. Now the player who opened for 10 bets 65. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere. I think for a bit and call. Small blind calls as well. At this point, I'm kind of praying for some brick, maybe like an undercard like a deuce or a 3, or a card that like misses the club but pairs the board, so I can counterfeit some possible 2 pairs like 9-8 or queen 9. The river's an offsuit deuce, which is kind of the perfect card. It goes check. Now the player who opened for 10 bets 140. I call, as I have underrep my hand, and I think I beat a lot of value hands here. He could have a hand like queen jack, king queen, ace queen. The player in the small blind folds quickly, and the player who opened for 10 ends up having king 5 of clubs, so he ends up having just king high. Obviously, if I bet this flop, he's not going anywhere with a gut shot in the second nut flush draw. Maybe we play a big pot. I think I'm okay with it, because obviously there's some decent percentage of the time that he gets there here. I don't mind necessarily lowering my variance in these situations on these draw heavy boards when I have these one pair type holdings. Sure, I could be playing a really, really big pot here by betting flop and betting turn, or betting flop, getting check raised, calling flop, calling turn, and possibly calling a big river bet. But on these types of boards, it's going to be really hard for me to get to showdown if in case he does check raise this flop, because I'm going to just have to basically hope that he has like a hand like king queen of clubs, king 10 of clubs, things of that nature, jack 10 of clubs, and he's gonna have a lot of other value hands here when he does check raise me. So I'm gonna be put in a really tough spot if he does play the hand really aggressively, and I might end up finding a fold. So we do pick that one up, and it was nice to be able to pot control and kind of hold on there. In this hand, I am in the small blind with ace 4 offsuit. There are a couple of limps to me. I call 2 more. The big blind checks his option. The flop comes ace 7-4 rainbow. I lead for 15 into 25. The big blind makes it 40 and everybody folds. I'm obviously not going anywhere. I think I'm going to be ahead here a lot of his like ace-x hands. I think he could have 7-4. Obviously, he could have ace-7, maybe pocket 7s. I call 25 more. And we go heads up to a turn of a king, which I think is a really good card because I don't expect him to ever have ace-king here, as I would expect him to open that out of the blinds. I check, he bets 45. I call. The river is an ace, and so now I make aces full 4s. And I think sometimes he's just going to have like maybe ace-10 here, ace-6, hands like that are just kind of trying to get cheaply to showdown, especially given his turn sizing. I also don't want him to necessarily check back like 7-4. So I decided to lead for 50 into him, trying to get value from his aces. At this point, he makes it 150. And to me, it honestly feels like when he raises this flop and now raises this river, he's actually going to have a fair amount of ace-7s here. He could also possibly have like pocket 7s or pocket 4s and be raising for value. As such, because it's only 100 more to call, there's no way I'm folding, but it really does feel like I am beat because just who the opponent is, and I'm not sure that he would necessarily be raising like bottom boats, like 4s full, 7s full. I call 100 more, and sure enough, he ends up having ace-7 offsuit. So a bit of a cooler there, blind versus blind, to make aces full against one another, but I think I ended up kind of losing the minimum there. It was really lucky for me that he doesn't bet larger on the turn. I think it's actually a mistake for him once he raises his flop and I call. I think a lot of times people don't try to get maximum value. Even on this river, when I leave this river, it's going to look a lot like I either have an ace or I have a full house. And so I think he should just be raising larger. You know, people don't like folding. Obviously, I think if he ends up making like 250, I might actually fold to him. So maybe he ended up kind of making the most for me particularly. But I think if I'm him, I end up going for a bit of a larger sizing. And perhaps actually that's a mistake. Maybe oftentimes when I have these really big hands, I get a little too greedy and try to get, you know, the maximum, wherein maybe it's best to just, you know, go for these 2 and 3, 4, go for these 3 or 4 X sizings on the river where you're likely to get paid off by people. Anyway, that was the last interesting hand of note. There were a number of other ones where I kind of just, you know, bet, took it down. There was actually one that I did forget, so let's get into that one where I isolated Jack-10 suited. We ended up going 4 ways for 40. The flop comes ace-7-6 rainbow, checks through, turns an ace. Now it goes check to me again. I think at this point it's fairly obvious nobody has an ace. I would play a lot of pocket pairs like 10s, jacks, and queens in this manner. So I decide to bet. I bet 105. I don't want to bet too small so that I'm not getting looked up by like pocket 8s, a 7, things of that nature. The player behind me folds, and now the action player calls from the blinds. The player in between folds, and the river's a jack. When he checks it to me, I think I'm going to have the best hand here a lot, but I think it's going to be way too hard for me to extract value from like a 7, pocket 8s, pocket 9s. So at this point, I just want to check it back and hope that this river jack is the best hand. In fact, if I didn't end up rivering a jack here, I probably would have just put him all in for like his 200. As such, maybe it's a mistake that I should be doing this anyway when I end up hitting the jack. But I think it's kind of an exploitative situation where I expect him to fold a lot of worse hands. But now that I river a jack, I don't ever expect to get him to fold an ace, and I hope to just check back and win. So I do check back, and I end up beating his 7. He just announces that he has a 7, so I roll over my Jack-10. So that was a nice one to hit, obviously. But I think he's probably going to just check fold this river a lot anyway, because had I not hit, I was just going to jam. And so like I said, there was a couple of other hands where, you know, small pots where I'm raising in position, people are calling, I see bet a flop or bet a turn and win. I ended up winning a little over 1,400. I think it was like 1,428 or something along those lines. So another great day. Things have just been rolling along. And we're going to be picking up Charlie now. Thanks again for watching. I hope you guys appreciate the analysis. Please, once again, like the video. That's going to really help the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I really appreciate all the comments. And that's it for today. All right, catch you guys later. How was your day?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, can we see out of the roof? Oh, man. What if we put my hand out of the car? My hands are out of the car!
Oh, you did.
You want to do it again? All right, ready, set. Hands out of the car! Ah! They're out of the car! Ah!
Oh, you did.
Okay, one more time.
Yeah.
Hands out of the car!
Only closed it.
Okay, we'll close it. Closing the roof. Say bye-bye.